Okay. All right. It's a little different, huh? This is so weird. Welcome, everybody. This remote 5-watt live stream is coming to you from Barcelona, Spain, where I have been for most of the last month. You guys probably noticed that I was on vacation. En directo desde Barcelona. And with that, I apologize to everyone that can speak the Spanish language. I didn't even take Spanish in high school. I took French in high school. A lot of good it's done me this month. Anyway, this episode of 5-Watt Live is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. More about the good people from TrueFire later in the stream. I'm at the tail end of being in Spain for the better part of a month. And if you've ever lived in a generally cloudy place, as I do, in upstate New York, you won't wonder at why I choose to come to a place that averages 300 days of sunshine a year. But Spain is also a country where I don't speak the language. And it's got me thinking a lot about listening. I've talked about this before here, but mostly in this video here. But there's other examples. And in particular, I find that I have to listen much more closely here. It's good to remember, and it's a good thing to talk about periodically. So here we are. Everything is a good, remember that everything good in our lives really comes from listening and not so much from talking. So perhaps somewhat ironically, I thought I would talk a little bit about that. I really wish we had I have guests on periodically, but I really wish I could sort of punch you guys in like on that old TV show Frasier, where what was the producer's name? You guys will tell me. Anyway, obviously I'm working on a very limited rig here. This is a picture. I took some pictures of it so you get a sense of what I'm looking at. This is me. You can see it's strategically placed on a couple of, I think they're Kleenex boxes here. Yeah. And then that's the shot from the other side. You can see this is my 2021 MacBook Air. I'm using the iPhone 13 mini that I have as a camera mounted on a DJI gimbal with selfie extension arm that makes it great as a desktop tripod. The mic is a very simple, almost unnoticeable, almost Zach Childs-ish lavalier mic here. And so you'll have to forgive the on-the-fly production qualities. I need help. You need to let me know. You need to let me know if the sounds are good and if the lighting is, you can handle it. BB's working on a project overseas. I came to his time zone, so he left. So we're on our own today, girls and boys. So everybody be nice. That was our friend John Cordy playing behind the intro. Again, of course. I was able to build a couple of videos before I left home for the holiday, and the second of those is coming out on this Thursday. It's the inevitable, the guitars of John Lennon. So keep an eye out for that. As always, jump to the description for the links for the online store for t-shirt, hats, hoodies, my Stomp presets, my favorite tones there. And remember, if you have a question or a comment, put it in the chat with a question mark at the front. If there's no question mark in the front, then I'm going to kind of assume you're talking among yourselves or to yourself, both of which are encouraged. All right. And finally, I took this photograph, this thumb. I took it right over there. I was sitting on the floor. It's kind of a mashup of my. This is the 5-Watt World official shirt, and I brought it to Spain. But I don't always. That's another whole topic. It just seems too self-centered to spend a whole batch of time on it. But if you want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. I actually don't live in these denim shirts anymore. It's another whole conversation. But I still work in them. So when I'm writing, this is what I usually wear. And then the scarf and the hat and the glasses. It's a mashup of my European street clothes and the 5-Watt Live uniform. It made me laugh, so I hope it made you laugh. All right. I am going to take breaks, and periodically, I'm working on this little tiny screen today. So I have my script up, and then I have to jump back and forth. So I will go back and forth and go there. Somebody said that people are commenting on the denim. Somebody said that I looked like, where is it? No, I got lost. Somebody put in that I would look like a famous, the manager of the Liverpool football club. I don't follow football, so I didn't know what that was. Anyway, like I said, it made me laugh. So I hope we get that. Take that back off. Whoop. John. There we go. All right. I've been accused of not knowing what a rant is or how to put one on. Like, kind of can't throw a good rave, can't do a good rant. But I don't know what else to call it when I feel strongly about something and it's in my mind and I need to get it out. And since I'm the only one talking, it sort of feels like me ranting a little bit. One of my favorite writers, Jim Harrison, said that he journaled so that he wouldn't keep thinking the same things over and over again. And there are times when I think that these live streams serve that purpose for me. Everybody told me when I decided to go to Spain, they said, "Oh, don't worry, everybody there speaks English. It'll be cool. Don't worry about it." And I've been places like Amsterdam where everybody kind of did speak English. And they said, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. I am fine, but everyone doesn't speak English. And it's honestly, I speak enough French so that when I've only been overseas a few times. I've been to France, Paris a couple times. I've been to Ireland. I speak English as much as they do. I've been working on my fledgling Spanish speaking skills here, but they are very, very poor. My accent's okay, but my knowledge of the actual language is pretty non-existent. It forces me, what it really does is it ends up forcing me to listen very, very carefully, because even the English that might be coming back at me might have a strong Spanish or Catalan accent. It's slightly different. Catalan's, I don't know if you know this, it's sort of a mix. It's a more northern thing, and it's more of a mix between French and Spanish. That's how it reads to me. I can't speak it, so what do I know? So it really makes me lean in and listen, and they'll switch. They know some words, like me. They know some words, and so they'll be going along in Spanish, and then it's English, and then it's Spanish, and then it's, so you got to really pay attention. And I find myself listening and being engaged in ways that reminded me of other listening stories. I was talking to David Barber about this idea, and he said that he always thinks of a quote from Charlie Parker that goes, "Music is 95% listening." Of course, he and I went searching for that quote, and we couldn't find it, and we couldn't attribute it to Parker, though I'd heard it before. And it fit right in with my notes, and so I slid it right in here. But it really kind of comes along with the whole idea to decide that all the best things in life come from listening. David did come across the Linda Ronstadt quote that I've heard before too, that she said 99% of singing is listening and hearing, and so the singing is actually just 1% of the job. I'm paraphrasing. So I keep coming back to that idea that the way we try to communicate is kind of upside down. If we're trying to communicate an idea, what people hear matters more than really even the way we're trying to say it. If we're trying to force our images onto them, then that's sort of self-centered in a way. Whereas if we worked hard to understand the way they're taking in the language, that seems like that would be a better way to communicate, a better way to share that information. And it left me thinking about how this works with music too. So it's kind of like it's the definitions of words that matter. It's the definitions that you have for a word, and it's the definitions that I have for words, and where those intersect and where they don't. That is the tricky part. It's the definitions in the listener's mind that dictate how much meaning is going to be received, though. It's the meanings that they have for what we say, and not what we intended to say in the first place. It's what they hear. That's the heart of communication. Less what's being said than what's being heard. Yeah, I'm going to talk more about that. And the way people think, the way people hear things is impacted by lots and lots of things. Some of you have heard me talk about it before. In school, I studied sociology. I think, when did I finish my master's degree? I was working in higher education. It was free. So I kept taking courses, read too many books. But there was a book, oh, my sleeves are pretty warm in here. There was a book that came out in 1990 by an author named Deborah Tannen. And it was this book. The book's called You Just Don't Understand. And the book outlines the differences between how men and women are taught to use language differently. I mean, obviously, it's been over 30 years since I read the book, but two things have always stuck in my head from Tannen's book. And that was a New York Times bestseller, and she went on to write other books about communication in in organizations, etc. But the two things that stuck with me are, the first one is a typical story where a husband and wife each come home from work, and the husband asks his wife, "How was your day?" And the wife talks for 30 minutes about all the things that happened, the people she saw, the conversations she had, and the meetings she attended, and how she felt about all those things. When she finishes, she turns to her husband and says, "How was your day?" And he says, "Fine." This usually gets a laugh because it's so relatable. The reason for this, though, is the second thing from that book that always sticks in my mind. It's probably one of the big messages of that book, that we assume that we're being understood, but the way we were taught to use language as men and women is very different. Women are taught that language is a way to forge connections and share understanding, but men are taught to use language as a weapon. It's a way we kind of get one up on each other, as a way to get ahead in the world. So each of those people in that story, the ironic part is, because it sounds like the man is just unconnected and stuff, but each of those people is actually being very caring in the way that they use language, but the expectations maybe don't match. And so that's a perfect example of where people are doing what they were taught to do, and the meaning is being delivered in the way it goes along with what they were taught. So the difference between men and women are everywhere and profound, but there are almost infinite other ways, that our backgrounds can impact what meanings have for what we hear. Let me take a quick look at the chat as we go along here. Gary Diamond says, "Keith looks like an old jazz saxophonist in the thumbnail." Thanks for the old part. Thanks. I had a birthday while you guys were away. Okay. See, then these things are here and I can't get them out again. All right. Yeah, see, everything just went rocketing by here. I'm way behind. There you are. Let me take a very quick look. For GQ, I was accused earlier. I did a meeting, an online meeting with Ish, and they accused me of looking very European. Actually, somebody stopped me on the street the other day and asked for directions. So at least the clothes are working, I think, to blend in. Says I look like a refugee hiding out in Spain. That's not so different. I'm hiding out in a place where there might be some sunshine. I have a nice note from Ron Ellis. Ron, I texted you. You didn't text me back after the last live stream that I did before I was gone. But that's nice. Thanks for saying that. I got a bit of color. It might just be the lighting, but I might have. I was out in the sun. I even went up in the mountains a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, Rick can teach me how to rant. So you guys do care too much about what I wear. I like that. Nacho is the guy you're thinking of, the Blackguard Guru. He is in southern Spain. I think he actually runs a publishing house. And if you want to see Nacho on camera, go look at my buddy Zach Child's videos that he did when he was traveling with Brad Paisley recently. Yeah, amazingly, I'm not in the UK. Although I have to tell you that my fiance left yesterday, and I'm going to touch on that. And I did seriously think in these next 10 days of flying up to England to meet people like John and Mick and Dan, people that I've talked to for years and never have been in the same room with. Jim DM me about that. Sakashta is a really interesting person. I think like a lot of us, probably only know him through Robin's guitar. Hey, Krinar. Lyle's driving his car. Don't distract him. Just Playing Bass says, music can be constructed as a language, and language can be interpreted differently to other people. I hope that makes sense. It makes exactly where I'm going to go. And so maybe that's my cue to get back to the script. Sean, you are a textbook case for Deborah Tannen. I love that you believe that you're conveying information. Is the Deborah Tannen's big point that we do think we're conveying information. And we had this whole thing in the last live stream where Lyle and I were going back and forth about the problem is people don't believe me, and our opinions are right because we learned them the hard way. And of course, we all think that. Anyway. Hey James, I'm not a big Gaudi fan. I am a big modern art guy, but the Gaudi thing never really did a lot for me. I shouldn't probably say that while I'm still walking around here, but I think that's a pretty big thing here. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Okay, so how does this relate to music? Let's get back to that. So let's talk about that. And Jeff's here, so let's talk about him. I was talking to Jeff, actually texting with Jeff while I was sitting in a restaurant eating my dinner last evening. I told him I was working on this script on thumb typing on my phone, which I'm wont to do. And I asked him if he thought that there was different cultural background. Jeff has traveled a lot. He's gigged a ton, and he's gigged a bunch in Europe. And I asked him if he thought there was a difference in the cultural background and if that impacted how audience react to him in Europe compared to how audiences react to him in the US. And if you're in the New York City area, in the 5 boroughs or close by, Jeff's got another gig coming up with Matt Schofield at the Bitter End on, I think, the 24th. Jeff, put it in the chat so everybody can see that unless you're already sold out. And interestingly, Jeff's first response was that it would be really hard to know. And I think that that's at the heart of this whole listening conversation. It is really hard to know whether what you're saying is being conveyed. In one of the local things I've learned in Catalan, when you're saying to somebody, yeah, you say, bali, 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 right? So I'm talking to the cab driver after I took Roman to the airport, and I'm talking to the cab driver, and I'm explaining something to him, and he's going, bali, bali, bali. And I'm like, oh, so you understand, like, what, that I do this YouTube thing? And he was asking me, what I do. And he's like, no. His English was just enough kind of thing. But he's going, bale, 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 right? So, people are listening. They're letting you know that they're listening. And you think that they're letting you know that they understand. And I thought that was profound what Jeff said. That Jeff went on to say, and I just need to say, I think Jeff nailed it with that. I think that that's right at the heart of what I'm trying to talk about. It's hard, bordering on impossible, to know what meaning the other person is experiencing. We think we're being very clear, but we're, of course, being very clear in our own head. And we may or may not be able to reach the other person using the language that we're using. Jeff went on to say that he thinks that the people that turn out to see him play are aware of the kind of blues and blues rock mix that make up his music. And I hope that's true, because I'm a big fan of Jeff's playing. And I do think that the world probably is, that the music has been shared widely enough that that probably is true now. That people have enough shared background that even in a gig in the States, somebody might know Howlin' Wolf and the guy next to him only knows Robbins playing or something, learned about Jeff's playing when he was in that band or something. So you never know. Everybody ultimately, this was actually in my master's, everybody ultimately is a culture of one. We are a completely unique set of cultural experiences that influence our ability to hear each other accurately. To hear each other accurately is really kind of, leave that right out. That's like the word reality. We'll just leave that out. Jeff did go on to observe that he thinks that the audiences in the EU are much more attentive and appreciative. And he observes that there aren't as many phones out taking videos, and that more people are just listening. I did Outward Bound when I first got out of college, and this is a wilderness experience thing. And part of that is they have you do a solo. And I did the one off the coast of Maine, and said they left me on an island by myself for 3 days. They didn't let you take a camera, but they did let you take a sketchbook. And the reason was that a camera lets you, they thought, a camera lets you distance yourself from the subject in a way that sketching that thing doesn't. Sketching the thing, they believed, engaged you with that subject. And I think Jeff is kind of saying that too, that, you know, at a show, if somebody's filming you, are they listening in the same way as they are concerned with getting a film, getting a good film? You know, it's like, I was here is the message instead of I absorbed this, you know. I think people with lots of playing experience often talk about having the feeling that's in the room. You know, times when the audience feels disconnected or when they seem to be hyper connected to the performance. I remember jazz guitarist Jim Hall used to say that when you feel like people aren't listening, you should turn down. I think it's a great example of paying attention to the audience's perception of the performance. For Jim to realize that he needs to do that, obviously he's playing with the band. I mean, this guy was on some amazing records, including Sonny Rollins as the bridge in a pianoless quartet. Knew a lot about listening and clearly had very clear ideas about what was happening in the room. And I think that that statement is great. And it's a good reminder that one of the listening equations that we have as musicians is that we're there playing for the audience. It's something that I remind myself about videos all the time. Rick and I used to talk about this, especially early in our channels, was that we would make videos and we would think they were just killer. We were like, man, I made this great video and nobody watched it. And then you kind of realize that you made the perfect video for you. I used language that really was meaningful for me, but it wasn't meaningful for the audience. Like even the script, I wrote these ideas out and then I rewrote the thing with language that's a little less Keith-centric, hopefully. I'm sure it still is too much so, but that's the nature of the conversation here. But reminding yourself that what you're playing is you're there performing for the audience. What you're making something is you're making something to convey meaning to the audience. Or at the very least, you know, for the bandmates. And hopefully everybody's listening to each other, at least on the bandstand. Which is the segue to, I might have told this story before, and I'm out here in Spain. I don't have pictures of me when I had this group, but from 1997 to 2001, I had a jazz quintet, in Binghamton, New York, called Miles Ahead. I was in a deeply Miles Davis period of my life. And I played with that group every week until I moved away to Vermont. And in October of 2000, and that was in June, I moved in June and then started the new job as director, the registrar at the University of Vermont. And that October, I went back. I had a chance to go back and do some hunting with a friend of mine, and then also play with the band again, sit in. I had this brand new job and big job for me and a big change, and I really hadn't touched the guitar. And so I was forced, you know, after 6 months of really not playing, I was really forced to pay attention in a way that I probably over time had not done as much every single week. And it ended up being one of the best gigs that band ever played together. Everybody in the band said so. It was just really good. And we all agreed that it was because we were focused on listening to each other, that we were there to support each other. And me more than the rest, maybe, because, you know, I was trying to fit back in with guys I knew well. They'd been playing music together while I was gone, but I hadn't been playing that kind of music, and I certainly hadn't missed that interaction. I've said this before. A poet friend of mine said that when I moved away, I would miss the band more than I realized. She said that I didn't allow a lot of organized imperfection in my life. And I like that description of jazz, organized imperfection. Let me jump in the chat and see what's going on here. Oh, that's great. Guitar Grandpa says, one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits of highly effective people is seek first to understand, then to be understood. I found that helpful in my business career, particularly as a manager. It's kind of upside down version of what I'm saying. Although he's saying listen first, I guess. He's saying listen first and then try harder to share what you're saying after that. Always the way. And I think especially live streams for channels are things that people put onto the background. So I knew somebody was going to bring this up. Carl saying, why do you think you're no longer listening when you take a picture? You are listening and showing admiration by keeping a memory in the moment. I think both are true. Actually, you know, my father was a painter, and then he actually was more of a photographer later in his life. And I think he interacted with his subjects, whether it was landscape or an individual, in a very specific way that probably doesn't fit that generalization that the people at Outward Bound made, but that's okay. Thanks, Lyle. Lyle's got it. Lyle's with us now, boys and girls. Yeah, this is a classic. God gave you 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth to see twice as much, hear twice as much, and say half as much. I think that's an old saying, actually. Scrolling back. There's John from Brisbane. Brisbane, right? I'm glad you enjoyed your moment in the sun there, Jeff. I saw Jeff did an Instagram post with coffee, which really is the same thing as going to Spain. All right. Let me jump. I actually don't have. I have quite a bit left. Let me do my TrueFire ad. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I'd already been using them for many, many years. I took lots and lots of lessons with Jeff before I ever had the pleasure of speaking with Jeff. I've always thought that the mission of TrueFire to be the #1 guitar learning platform in the world fit well with my interest in buying lessons over buying new gear. As I've said before, we think that new gear will improve our playing, but we know that learning some new things will. There's 45,000 lessons in the library taught by Grammy award-winning artists and session musicians and some of the best instructors in the world, just like my buddy Jeff. I don't have my standard morning lesson set up here, and I miss it. I miss taking a lesson every day. It feels so much more productive than burning 15 minutes scrolling on the phone. As I say this, I realize I should take some time, to do some acoustic lessons. I bought an acoustic guitar when I got here, so I'd have something to play for the month, and I'm either going to sell it back to the store when I leave or have them ship it to me back in the States and see if it fits in with the acoustic jam thing that I do. It's basically a copy of a Martin D18. We'll probably have time at the end. I'll pull it out and show it to you guys, maybe strum it a bit. David Barber was laughing because I pulled the lav mic off and clipped it on a glass right in front of the guitar when I was demoing it for him. There's tab notation, slow motion, looping, and so many great tools to tailor your lessons to the way you learn best. You can get 35% off any courses using the link in the description. I've always used the all access pass because I like to move from course to course. I like lots of kinds of music, and this helps me do that. Remember, if you use the link in the description, you help support the channel and get some great lessons at the same time. In music, finding all these new experiences, it's kind of like traveling, talking to somebody new or listening to somebody like Matt Schofield or Eric Johnson talk about their experiences. You're getting to have a little piece of their life experience along with it. All right, so back here. Wow. It's nice to see everybody turn out after I've been gone. I'll pull it out. Let me get through my rant. Talking about people paying attention to each other, or Jeff talking about people paying attention at a gig, always reminds me of how our attention span has been eroded. I have a real problem with Instagram. There's just enough good stuff in Instagram to waste my life scrolling in there. And my favorite book from last year was a book by Johan Hari called Stolen Focus. That's this book. I think this is a paperback edition, and that was a New York Times bestseller. The book is really an outline of the research on how our ability to focus has gone down over the last 2 decades, and very, very much in the last decade. And it shows that one of the things that was scariest about the book is that it shows that the way we practice paying attention to things then goes across our whole life. So if we do have an Instagram habit, like I said, I wrestle with, then that paying attention for just a few seconds at a time will bleed over into other parts of our life. I find myself watching movies or streaming a TV show, and I'm thinking I should pick up my phone. It's hard for me to just stay in that moment. And he's saying that is our brain has learned, well, he's saying that the research shows that our brain has learned to only pay attention in those small little bursts. It gets good at absorbing things in small bursts. And that bleeds over into our whole life. And I don't know how many of you have that same kind of experience that I described with a movie or a TV show, that like, I used to say to my son, and now I'm seeing it myself, we'd be all watching a movie and he'd want to be on his phone too. I'm like, one media at a time, bud. He was really little at the time. And honestly, I wasn't using Instagram or any of those things now, and using it for the channel is what kind of exposed me to it. The good news about this, though, it's also covered in the book, is that you can retrain your brain and regain that focus. What we need to do is do things that have prolonged attention. Things like reading, watching a movie without looking at the phone, or sitting and listening to music in a club or a concert hall or your living room. I kind of recommend a music hall or a club because there's this wonderful social thing about not using your phone while there's other music, live music happening, that I think that would be helpful to me, at least. Like I said, I struggle with it. So I think when it comes back around to music, we kind of ask ourselves, how do we take things in? What are the cultural things? I had this amazing experience with, years ago, I went to visit Rick at his house, and he'd drive the girls to school, his daughters to school. And he would play what he calls high information music with a lot of dissonance and things like Keith Jarrett or Alan Holdsworth, or even, like some Pat Metheny stuff is pretty challenging. And while he's driving them to school, he'd be playing this music in the front, and the girls are in the back on their phones. And he'll say, "Hey, sing this solo." And he'd put on some Alan Holdsworth solo. And the girls, these, like preteen girls, they're teenagers now, but these preteen girls would sing the Alan Holdsworth solo note for note because they'd been exposed to it. And it left me wondering what they would be able to sort of take in that I just couldn't. Like there's only so much of that kind of stuff that I can listen to and enjoy it and truly enjoy it. And that was just like regular stuff for them. So they had a different context for what felt like a challenge with the music. So it was a great example of something they'd just been listening to it all along. I thought that was really pretty interesting. I'll also say that I think actually, for me, blues, any kind of music can be deep, and the subtlety of blues area was always a challenge for me. Part of my brain would kind of turn off when I'd think, oh, he's just blowing over pentatonics, and I would miss the little bends and all the details that make it, that Jeff always says, that sort of the hallmark of a real player. And it took me years to do that. I actually think this is why people have such varied reactions to Robin Ford. Some people really just get into the half diminished thing that he does, and they're kind of waiting for it to happen. And then other people, for me, I'm realizing that he's mostly playing pentatonics most of the time, but his phrasing is so unique that I'm entertained. There's no other way to put it. I am surprised by the choices of what he plays, and that is entertaining to me. I think that melodies were written very deliberately, and unlike most soloing, people spend a lot of time trying to decide how to say musically how to say what they wanted to say. I've only thought of this really in the last 10 years, but 25 years ago, I had my first jazz group that I put together, and it was in the mid 90s. Oh, so it's 35 years ago. But I put a trio together, and it was a flugelhorn and a muted trumpet guy. It was Mike Cuomo, and an upright bass player, and me on guitar. And when I was pitching the band idea to the guys, I gave them each a list of tunes, and we were sitting there, we had coffee in a coffee shop that we eventually ended up playing in a bunch. And they both looked over at me at the same time. They're like, all these tunes are ballads. And I laughed. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'd fallen in love with the way Miles Davis played ballads. I liked the purity of the message, and I enjoyed the sense of calm. Listening to a ballad gives the listener. It seemed like someone that pauses after it's like someone that pauses after they say a sentence. They give you time to take it in. They're giving you time to process, find your own meanings to the words that were used, and then check back in with you. Yeah, melodies are musical sentences that someone has taken pains to load up with their meaning and to make their emotional message clear. That's the way I think about that. So we mostly played ballads, and we got a ton of work. And even when we soloed, we would take like single choruses. It was sort of like, AM radio in the 60s. The tunes were like 4 minutes, not your typical jazz thing. And people loved it. We played coffee shops, wedding receptions, dinners, cocktail parties, for the hospital, and fundraisers and this kind of stuff. Folks could choose to let us be musical wallpaper, or they could choose to listen, because there was some good things being said musically with those guys. I'm always collecting. Here's the question of the day. I'm always collecting ballads. So put your favorite ballad title and the artist of the version that you like in the chat, so I can go back and mine those. I'm always looking for favorite ballads, and I'm always sharing those with John Cordy. He still plays in the wee small hours in the morning and gives me credit for mentioning it to him. And it's one of my favorites from old records. All right, how am I doing here? It's always more than I think. Of course, this impacts, well, let me see where we are with the chat. Jack Bird said, how do you feel? Thanks for the top chap. I can't talk. I don't know what I was thinking doing a live chat at 10 p.m. my time here. Speaking of which, I apologize. I understand I'm walking on Phil McKnight's time here. That was not intentional. I apologize. How do you feel about performers speaking out directly to their audience about its lack of attention or disrespect? Yeah, I am very torn, probably as you all are, about performers. Yeah, I don't do it. You know what? I'd be much happier if somebody like Jeff or somebody out there from the chat, maybe you guys could answer that. If you're out there gigging, then talk about that. One of my favorite records is a classical guitar duet record by Julian Bream and John Williams. And Julian Bream says at the beginning of it, because if they're going to record it, so since this is a live recording, I ask that, I won't do his accent. I ask that if you have an uncontrollable cough, you'd please wait till between the pieces. And John Williams says, or at least the loud parts of the music. That was recorded before iPhones and stuff. So, great. People are putting those in there already. I love it. Okay. All right. Only got a couple more points here, boys and girls, and then I'll pull out the acoustic. Although I don't really know if this thing is going to do a good job playing it. I'm always trying to work this quote in. When I lived in Vermont for a long time, and Vermont had two presidents, and one of them, the best known, was Calvin Coolidge. And he's famous for saying that no man ever listened himself out of a job. And I would say that's absolutely true of musicians. I've had people that I let go from my band for overplaying. And I often joke that anybody can be replaced except for a drummer that doesn't overplay. That's a jazz kind of world, a jazz joke. But if you think about it, that's incredibly profound. And I said I have a background in sociology, but the fact is that higher education in particular has a world where everybody's trying to impress everybody else. I had a therapist say to me once, you don't need to prove to anybody you're one of the sharpest people in the room. You either are that or you're not. So trying doesn't really change it. I had a big project and I was going to talk about it, but I don't want to spend the time on it because I'm running short and I want to have time for some questions. I did a big project and it wasn't something that I had a lot of background in, but the success of the project was that I listened to the students and the faculty about what they needed. And when people would say, how did you ever get that accomplished? We were the first school in the world to do it. And it was allowing students to change their name without changing their legal name so that they would be safer while they were transitioning their gender. And I would always say this is the same thing. I'd say, well, I just listened. And then over time, it became kind of funny to say, I just listened, because it's so rare that people just sit there and listen. There's many things, get in the way of that. As I said fiance a little while ago, and I just got engaged, and it shows, I guess, how optimistic I am deep down. And we had some pictures. Roman and I had some pictures taken. We were in Barcelona. We actually hired a photographer, and I think she knew that this was coming, of course, but she didn't know when, and she didn't know I think she had a sense I had the ring, but anyway, but we had a photographer take our picture in different places. Also gave us a tour of the city because the guy's lived here a long time. And so I worked out with the guy that, I was going to do the proposal at this one time. But he sent us hundreds of pictures to look through. And any number of these pictures were unusable because I'm talking because I was uncomfortable. And I'm probably joking around about being uncomfortable about having my picture taken by anybody but me. I'm used to, this always still makes me nervous, but that camera is something that I'm controlling. Somebody else taking pictures, who has photo shoots, So that was a weird thing, but I'm talking, and it's ironic. And it shows that I still fall back on talking as a way to feel comfortable for myself, or to try to connect to people, to try to find common ground with people. And secondly, about that, I'm old enough, if not wise enough, to know that I really enjoy listening to someone else talk about what they're thinking. I think Oscar Wilde said, I know what I'm thinking. I always remind my now fiance that my favorite thing is to listen to her talk to me about something that interests her the most. So if you're lucky enough to find those kinds of people, I encourage you to work at keeping them in your life as well. My last little story here, and I think Dan is still here. Oh, Jeff answered a question. I usually hope the club handles it. Had a few tense times on stage with Robin with that. I have asked nicely, could I ask you not to do that? Or whatever the annoying thing they're doing over there. Yeah, I love comedians when they're good at handling hecklers. Okay, so there's a guy who's been following the channel for a long time, and he actually grew up near where I grew up, and we have friends in common. And when I was living there, I actually got to sit down with this guy, Dan Bailey. And like I said, he's related to a bunch of people that I went to school with. And Dan is an avid music listener in the way that most of us, well, at least me, kind of lost since we were in college. And his Instagram feed is full of pictures like this. This is a pretty recent one. I think it shows his new speakers. It shows pictures of his stereo and an album cover, and often pictures of his dog laying there as well. And I love the variety of stuff that he puts in these photographs. And of course, he doesn't have music under these things. Often he doesn't do production. He's just giving you this still life of a thing in his life, where he's sitting and listening to a whole record. I haven't talked to Dan about this. I did text him to make sure that he was cool with me using his picture today, but I wonder if he realizes that by doing this, he's improving his ability to just sit and listen to the entire record. He's actually getting better at listening to everything and everybody in his life. And by doing that, he's actually getting better, that his life is probably just plain getting better. I hope he does. I hope he does realize that. Okay, therein endeth the rant. Victor, this is an important point. Good. She said yes. She did say yes. I asked her. I told the story about asking, right? I didn't say she said yes. I got approval to put a picture of us together here from her, but I ran out of spaces. There's only 10 slide slots, and I don't want to mess with the Google Slides, etc. So that's there. All right. So what do we got for questions here? I can get the guitar out. I'm gonna have to like take apart my rig here. That's a Dojo Guitar Repair. Like one of the only, maybe the only besides a 5-watt shirt, world shirt that I have that has writing on it. I actually usually put this shirt on to film. It's kind of a lucky shirt. So it's good. It's a good travel shirt for that reason. I like that. Telling the audience, do whatever they want. We're just jamming. Great, really good versions and ballads. So keep putting the ballads up there. And you can tell me if this sounds like anything. The guitar, not me. I'm too shy. So as I said, this is a Dreadnought. It's a REVERB D05. That's obviously a kind of a fancy D18. I will say that the mahogany is the kind of mahogany that you'll see like on old guitars, but through a modern finish. So you can really see the flame in the mahogany. And this was a guitar that was hanging up on the shelf at the guys at Fanatic Guitars here in town. And actually I need to do a post with them. I put up an Instagram post saying, guess where I am, guess what store I'm in, etc. And the answer was Fanatic Guitars. I was buying this for the trip. I don't even remember. I did tune this. All right, I need someone to do a sound check. You guys let me know if you can hear it. I'm trying to get close to the microphone without falling off this high top stool. And I did it as predicted. Okay, try that again. This is what happens when you use a drink as a mic stand. Okay, now my hands are wet. I'm getting on the guitar. What's important? That's a guitar. It's a nice guitar. It sounds like an old Martin. It sounds like old Martins sound when they're new. David Barber told me a great story about Michael Hedges. Let me see if I can tilt the camera a little bit and get more guitar. Oh, a little more guitar in here. Pretty soon you'll see the edge of that computer. Ballad of Drink Mike. Yeah, that's for sure. I like the comment that it was wet, that the mic was full wet. This is that is hopefully bad enough version of After the Gold Rush, and it's like me trying to learn the Michael Hedges version from college, and hopefully it's bad enough so that it doesn't strike a copyright thing on here, which I doubt it will. I think I've played it live before. The other one is actually an Irish tune called The Lowlands of Holland, which I thought was great. You know, when I learned it years ago, that there was an Irish tune, being a person of Dutch descent, about being in Holland. I thought that was great. So, I did a mic check with David Barber, and I did a Jason Isbell song, and I sang a little piece of it because it's a really amazing. Actually, it was the Ryan Adams tune, Carolina, and that definitely will strike the copyright. So you're not going to get to hear singing and playing, which is probably all for the best. Anyway, Ballad of David Fry. I don't know what that is. You got to play some flamenco. I never had any flamenco chops. Just playing bass. So that's it. Any other questions? Questions? Random questions? Were you listening? Pull this back over here. I don't think the mic got soaked down too bad. Oh, Steel Ice Band. Yeah, it's an old tune. There's a version, a more modern version by two brothers, have that sort of tight Celtic harmony. And I love that version. That was where I kind of took it. And then they do it like in drop, and then the brothers playing octave mandolin. So you just get this huge wash of drone stuff. So there you go, Lyle. Let's get back to it. Best thing I've had to eat in Barcelona might have been today at lunch. If I wasn't using the camera, Lyle, I'll send you a picture of it. I had a veal entrecôte today. So I found a little tavernetta around the corner from here that has a chef who about every, 20 minutes walks through the dining room with a glass of beer about this size and a cigarette. And he stands in the doorway and shares that cigarette with all of us. And he'll talk to the staff in English, in Spanish or French, alternating. And like the whole conversation as he walks away from the kitchen is all in French or in Spanish. And so the menu is this tremendous mix of local dishes and like I had duck confit yesterday. See, I can do the French accent. I've been doing that for a long time. And I actually, honestly, my kind of way of doing this, Roman likes to eat different places and just experience lots of different stuff. And that's a great way to live. And I love doing that with her. But I'm writing now. I'm kind of working. So the reality is I'll probably keep eating. Now that's a good place. I'll probably eat half my meals there. The ones that I'm not just pulling together myself here. So that was the veal is local and the duck actually was local and they confited. They cooked it themselves. They did. Confit du canard. Oui. I did actually visit Fanatic Guitars. I actually talked to those guys about doing a live stream, but I don't think we're going to be able to pull it together. I hope so. It takes a lot of time, and I have a lot of writing still to do while I'm here. I'm trying to write a YouTube course for musicians, like trying to start a channel. I think that doing that is a typical thing to do now. Hey, David is here. David Garrett, Vista Cycling Tuscany. I got to meet David. David has been corresponding with me on Instagram since I got on Instagram in 2021. It was really nice. Got to hang out with him. I'll put up a couple pictures probably as Instagram posts now that I'm back doing Instagram. And he lives in Florence. Oh man, I'm not going to remember. We had really kind of all the meals I had in Florence were really good. I took Roman over there for her birthday. We had at the Cafe de Nelly, which was very good. And we had wild boar on tagliatelle. And then we had the Florentine steak. And then at the other place, we had a real spaghetti carbonara, which is made with, you know, a raw egg, and then it builds that. And then, yeah, and then I had a steak in a green pepper sauce. That was very, very good. There, see, it's too late for me to think about food. The REVERB is a hell of a deal, and it's a great guitar. And when I bought it, I arranged with them to have them ship it to me in the States when the trip is over. It's not an inexpensive guitar. It's used, but it is one of their top of the line models. And I was surprised. I always think of REVERB as a company, a Canadian company, but this guitar was built in Oxnard, California. So I don't know the whole story. William X, I was never into hot tuna, actually. There's a whole period of time where I was listening to either progressive rock in college, when I would have been listening to hot tuna. And then I went right into jazz from there. Somebody asked earlier, I had a question go by. They were asking for recommendations about mandolin. Is it realistic that you come to Britain and make some content with John or Dan and Mick? You know, the reality is that for the last 4 years, this is the only vacation I've taken in the last 4 years. And I had never worked with, I had a script editor, Perry McManus, who was amazing. Perry did so much, and he was teasing me. I said to him, you know, it's been a long time since we got to work together. And he joked that my script's improved enough that he's still in my head. And that's probably true. So I would love to be able to find enough time to be able to make a trip to England, maybe in the fall, and then work it out to hang out with those guys. I don't know if I just make a video with Mick and Dan. I'm not sure I'm at that level, but those guys are great. And anyway, Jose Daniel Zamora says, good recommendations for mandolin. Mandolin is actually how I got to jazz. And so I would say go listen to everything David Grisman ever did if you want the crossover kind of hot club de France. There, I did that with my upstate accent. Even though I saw Stefan Grappelli when I was in college, I saw him play when he was quite old. And then Mike Marshall, and then Chris Thiele, who is the current, you know, MacArthur winning mandolinist, are probably of our lifetime or anyone's. His playing is absolutely extraordinary. And if you want to go in a different bluegrass direction, you know, DM me, tell me what kind of music you're into. I still really do enjoy playing. I really miss playing electric. That was one of the harder things about this trip. And I like to play acoustic guitar in the evening and, you know, play and sing. And for Roman, and she really likes it. And it's good for me. You know, it's not easy. It's scary, especially if you're singing for somebody you care about, because you care about their opinion. Yeah, I'm sure that Lyle and I could talk about food all day. Oh, I don't think he was asking for specifically mandolin recommendations for a mandolin, a brand. Oh, maybe I misunderstood altogether. For mandolins can be expensive because they're carved instruments, kind of like archtop guitars. It used to be that the entry-level mandolin to get was a Kentucky. I think they're still made. I think they're made in China. I think they were one of the early ones in China. The Eastmans are really good. I don't know where you are in the country. I would tell you to go play them. They're very different kind of pitches. I mean, timbres, whether they're more bluegrass or more of a sweet kind of melody instrument. But again, you know, email me at 5wattworld@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram, and I'll do as much as I can to help answer any question that I can. All right. Okay. If there's no more questions, and Perry's not here to ask what's the best pizza in town. The best pizza I had in Florence was at a place called Yellow, and the staff was amazing. And they had pizza that was being made with dough. And you guys know that I like to bake my own bread. That was being made with dough that was done with a starter, with a mother. And I finished the pizza the next day, some of the leftovers, and the dough was still amazing cold. It was the little thin crust pizza, but absolutely had integrity. It was just, it's just incredible. Anyway, see, you got me talking about food. I'm totally off topic, not listening, trying to listen, but I'm not listening. Anyway, so thanks for coming and hanging out. I appreciate everybody letting me have a couple weeks off, and I'm glad to be back. And I'm going to do one next week. Next week, I have Ben Adrian from Line 6 on. Ben is the mad genius that heads up the team that does the amp models. And he's even built some things that are some of my favorite models that weren't based on specific pieces of hardware. They're things he's learned about modeling. So like the litigator amp was his ideas about Dumbles, and then the Adriatic delay, Ben Adrian, is one of my favorite delays. So he's going to come on. I've known that they were going to do that release with the new version of the hardware, just kind of gave it a facelift. And I've got some of those coming, but the fact is, the reality is you can load the new firmware on your old catalysts. So they're right there as well. I'm going to be back here next Tuesday with Ben. And then probably when I get home, I'll be doing a live stream with David again. There's about 5 topics that I want to do with David, one of which is gain staging, and another one of which is great tone at home, great tricks for great tone in your living room. All right. So thanks again. Hey, if there's anybody who is in this area and you've seen this video and it's still before April 24th, I'm still in 2024, then I'm still in town, and reach out to me with a DM or whatever. I would love to get together with some people who are friends of 5 Watt World here, and I haven't been able to reach out. I'm gonna do an Instagram post and a post on the channel tomorrow to try to get together with some people. So, all right. Thanks again, and I'm gonna let John play us out as always, and I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.